guys. Got a lot on my mind lately.
No, dude, don't think like that.
Dude, it's pretty bad.
What's bothering you?
You know that junior composition class we're all taking together?
Craig.
Oh, dude, it's really getting in my head, dude.
No. Don't
No,
let
you
him
can't
get
let
to you
that
like
happen.
Like, it's okay. Don't let him get into your head like that.
I just want to save the world, man.
How are you gonna do that?
How can you, one unskilled, unprofessional man, save the world? How is this gonna happen?
I've been thinking, like, I know this is a little crazy, but we could adopt some pandas. You know how much bamboo's around here?
I see where you're going with this.
I'm just saying,
You know
start
what? You know
small.
what? Yeah. Okay. Speedway. Bags of ice are only like 350.
350.
My car could make it to the coast.
Dump some ice in the ocean? Yeah.
Dude, that'll all
Stop global warming.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
These are good ideas. You know, what if we started a garden?
A garden?
Yeah, a garden. Think about it. You're planting more vegetables. You can eat the vegetables.
You listening to yourself?
That's less
Vegetables?
trips to the grocery stores.
Yeah, I mean, we could reduce our carbon footprint just by growing a garden?
I think we can do that.
Onions grow in the dirt.
They do. Same
Let's
with
start a
carrots.
garden. Let's do it.
Wait. I don't have anywhere to put a garden. Like my house, there's no grass back there.
I have a planter in the front of my house, but it's probably about, like, 2 feet across.
I have a sad excuse for a yard.
How can men with no yard start a garden?
I'm so broke.
Community food initiatives. What is this? Jamie, what do you have on this computer here?
Need a student loan fast?
No. This.
Oh. Community food initiatives.
Oh my god. It's a community garden. Anybody that lives in Athens can come, pay a small fee, and garden as much as they want for the whole year.
I know what gardening means.
I know what this means. We're gonna save the world, guys.
You got it.
Yeah, I would say start with things from seeds that are easy to grow. Radishes, I think, are always like that first. What do they call it? Call it in drugs the gateway. Radishes are a good gateway vegetable because they come up like 4 days after you put the seeds in the ground. They're already coming up, and then it takes them 3 or 4 weeks, and you can eat them. So I would say radishes. Onions are real easy because you can buy little sets and just stick them in the ground. Lettuce is good because everybody eats lettuce. It seems like you're not going to find people that grow it and they're like, I don't know what to do with it. Broccolis is a good crop, but it's a little bit trickier. It's a little bit more finicky. So I'd say once you have skills at a few other things, then move into stuff like broccoli. For a summertime garden, I think the classic things, peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers, things that, again, because everybody eats them, and you know when they're ready. It's not like you have to ask somebody, is it time to pick this yet or not? So things that we're really familiar with are the best place to start in terms of growing your own food.
Can you describe some benefits of gardening? Participating in a backyard garden or a community garden? What are some benefits they could have?
But I think it really just provides an opportunity to be outside, to do things with your own hands, to be creative, to watch things grow. I think maybe as a kind of recreation, it has more value than it does in terms of reducing the cost of the food that you buy. It certainly also helps to sort of realize that it is challenging to grow food, and if you go to the farmer's market and you wonder like, wow, that's a lot of money for some lettuce. But if you've tried to grow your own lettuce, you might think, wow, yeah, if I was selling the lettuce that I grew and I was trying to pay myself, $8 an hour, I'd have to charge more than that. It's just, we start to think about the amount of effort and attention and skill it takes to grow stuff, and I think we value food a little bit more, just having that experience. But I think when you really look at what we do for recreation, there's so many things we do purely for recreation that don't create anything. We run a marathon. I often wonder, it's like, man, that is a tremendous amount of time and energy invested in just saying I ran a marathon. Fraction of that time in your garden, you could have food to eat. And I emphasize in this space that gardens are also really a place for a huge diversity of other organisms that you won't find in a lawn. So butterflies and birds and other flowering plants and amphibians, and just I try to emphasize when students are here that if you just walk around and pay attention, this is really a sort of hot spot for biodiversity. Whereas if you look at that big empty piece of grass across the road, it's like a monoculture of grass. There's almost nothing there except for grass. And that everybody can create that kind of space in their backyard if they garden a little bit.
Would you consider gardening an easy practice? Or if so, why don't more people do it?
It's a really good question. I mean, there's many people that really just don't have access to space. Many people would say, I lived in a facility. I don't have my own soil that I can say is my own. I rent or I live in a multi-unit. So I'd say most people, if you just sort of look across the board, most people would say, first of all, it's access to space. But many communities are providing, community space, community gardens. I don't know. I guess it is, it constitutes work as compared to recreation. If you're trying to manage a garden, you can't just forget about it for 3 weeks and then say, oh yeah, today, like bicycling, you say, today I'm going to go for a long bike ride. But you have to be sort of fairly consistent about it. You decide that's part of your recreational activity is gardening.
Basically, for someone who's not aware of the problem, why is nitrogen? Why do you focus so much energy on trying to know about nitrogen?
Yeah, mostly because when we think about fertilizers that we use in agriculture all over the world now, it requires a lot of energy to create that fertilizer. So the three primary things that go in fertilizers are phosphorus and potassium and nitrogen. Phosphorus and potassium are mined from the soil. So it takes a lot of energy to mine them, but it's relatively small amount of energy relative to creating nitrogen, the nitrogen component of your fertilizer, and that's usually done with natural gas. So high temperature, high pressure creates the ammonia or other forms of nitrogen. But nature has a way of making nitrogen by this association between plants and bacteria that grow in the roots of certain kinds of plants. So essentially nature can use sunshine to make nitrogen. And that's really sort of trying to improve that system or utilize it more often is really the goal of the research that has to do with nitrogen fixation in plants. Say, well, there's a natural process. Let's take more advantage of the natural process and rely less on synthetic adjustment of nitrogen.
Where does the bulk of the produce go for this garden?
Well, I encourage students who are in the class to eat it.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult now that we're in spring semesters. People who know about the garden, so like I'd say about a third of the students in this class will also be here this summer.
Yeah.
So we essentially take over the gardens that are being left behind and harvest from those. And if we have more than we can find people who are out here to eat, then we give it to the donation station, the Community Food Initiatives donation station.
Cool.
Alright, here it is. It's day one. We've got some seeds and some soil, some mulch, and some manure, which has been aged for 3 or 4 years, which it's important, guys, to remember that you need to age your manure for at least 1 year so that you don't have any festering or cultivating E. coli. So what we're going to do here on day one is plant some seeds so that we can get them growing for 10 days in order to transplant them outside. So what I'm going to do is take this mixture here. I'm going to fill up these flats right here about 2/3 of the way and throw down some seeds. First, we've got some wonderful cherry Roma tomatoes. Delightful. Come out real little like that. So what I'm going to do is sprinkle some in here. And then on the other side, we got some burpee sweet peppers, California Wonder. Got me wondering.
JK.
So, Jamie, why is it so important that we use a combination of both soil, manure, and other, plant nutrients? Why is this so important?
I think it's obviously as a soils person, it's critical, and I think it's one of the things that people don't think about, and it's one of the things when what makes soil different than other things that you think about plants is how much we can manipulate it, how much we can change it. I mean, yeah, you can put your plant in a certain spot where it gets a lot of sun, but you can't change cloudy days, sunny days, how much rain. But soil is one of these things that we can do that can change it. It can alter the basically nutrients for plant growth. It's essential for the production of flowers. It also can help with pathogens and diseases. And obviously it's support and structure and things like that. And most people with gardens don't realize that a lot of the problems that they have with their garden has to do with not enough organic matter, not enough soil carbon in there. And it's one of those things that if you have more soil carbon in there, basically it has this cascading effect. It's this great moderator of things that will promote plant growth and vigorous plant growth on that.
So, for small scale garden, as ours is, which would you think is the best? Which one specifically would be?
I would say obviously the manure, and also it's not just the fertilizer. When you add manure, it increases the water holding capacity of the soil, mitigates against climate change, prevents against local climate change. I gotta say, all these drought events and things like that. Fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer won't do that for you. And so you get this added benefit of not watering it as much, or it doesn't succumb to drought as much and things like that. So it's
Welcome to day 3. We've got some nice untouched earth here. I'm looking to start a patch. I'm gonna take this hoe, I'm gonna turn it over in what we call the double dip method.
So we start with one nice hoe pull, and then we come back in with the shovel. And so thus we have double dipped.
So it's not you get added benefit. It's just not nutrients, but it improves the quality of your soil. It actually makes it more resistant to compaction, which is pretty much one of the worst things that you can do to your soil. You compact it, you lose basically the habitat for fine roots, and it doesn't matter how much fertilizer you have or how many nutrients, plants just won't grow in that.
You want to make sure to get all the soil nice and loose, because when you put your veggies in here, the roots are going to need space to grow. If it's all compacted down, then there's no room for roots, and then there's no vegetables. So compaction transitions perfectly. So we've been told that turning over your garden is essential at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is absolutely necessary every year?
Well, what I say, if you have to turn over your garden, you have a soil organic matter problem, bar none. And I know it seems kind of like, what are you talking about? But if you go into any natural prairie, if you go into the forest, you don't need to turn that up. I've been to organic farmers before where I can basically put my hand all the way down into the elbow, down to my elbow into the soil. My garden, I have a raised bed that I've been working on. I can do that now. It's really sweet. It's kind of weird though. So what you're doing, why you're turning that over, what it's actually doing is you're creating aggregation. You need good aggregates, pliable soil, habitat for roots and things like that. And what it also does is when you turn over the soil, you're enhancing decomposition. And like I said before, when you get more decomposition, more nutrients are available for plant growth. But if you have enough organic matter, you don't need to turn it over. Though you should do a little bit. I talked to people before, though, there's a downside, especially I found out the hard way, where I didn't turn over my soil. Things were doing good, but it created a habitat for slugs. So I now do like a real shallow turning over just to prevent that kind of stuff on there. So you need, generally, the more organic matter you have, you don't need to turn it over, or it's not as necessary. But if you don't have the organic matter, you have to do it, or it'll become compacted. And then eventually you'll know, a good way of knowing, especially with our soils around here, is when it's really dry, it doesn't crack. Soil, when you have organic matter, it's flexible. It's like asphalt versus concrete, you know? And if it doesn't crack open, that's a good indicator that you have plenty of organic matter, and it's flexible and movable. And you know darn well here that if it gets really dry, it cracks open, then when it rains, all the water just drains right out and your soil stays dry.
Big day, Jamie. Moving the flat to the plot. We got some nice seedlings growing. Should be a good day. Make sure to grab the fertilizer. The rest good.
I think we're ready to roll. Here we are, day 17, going over the basic watering procedure. Something you want to make sure to do every day that you don't expect rain to happen. Especially during those first 2-3 weeks of growth, it's essential to have a very wet plot. So, take it to our vegetation. You want to make sure to pour it so that, especially when you have seedlings and such, that you don't have too heavy of a stream coming down on it. You don't want to crush the plants. You want to make sure it's a light drizzle. And avoid dropping it on the plants as much as possible, and just get the surrounding area. Because you really can't see where all the roots are, and the roots are what are taking up all the water anyway. This corner here, we don't have much plotted right now. Well, there's no vegetables plotted there, so I'm not going to worry about watering it. I'm actually going to not water it to encourage weeds to stop growing. But honestly, the only way to really get rid of your weeds is to take them all up as you see them. Here we are, day 20. It's hot. Come to do some weeding. Grab some tools out of the tool shed. Spade, hand rake. Everything you need. Should get us weeds out of the plot that we need. Bring some water over to it.
invasive plants. They're actually indigenous plants, but since we're trying to operate our own little garden in here, we don't want anything from the outside working in, because that facilitates competition for the food plants that we're growing and takes up root space that they would definitely need to get their nutrients from the soil. So what we're doing here is just digging them up down to the root. These are typically, this is just grass right here. There are some plants from the plot that was used by former gardeners that are growing. They have to take those out. Really all we're doing is just clearing the space for our roots.
So here we are, day 24. We came today with the fact that it froze over last night, which is something that is very bad for your seedlings and seeds and your early crops. You don't want, if at all possible, you want to make sure that you plant your stuff outside after the first frost date, because as you can see, we definitely have some negative effects of letting it be out during those harsh temperatures. Plants rely on liquid water to pass their nutrients throughout their body, and if it gets below freezing and they're this small, it's very easy for for things to stop working within the plant, and so growth stops and you get something like this. Fortunately for us, some growth has still continued. We have our onions over here that are still doing quite well, and we have our bergamot, and it seems to be doing all right despite the harsh conditions. But planting early in the season is good if you want to get a head start on harvesting, but you should always be mindful of the first frost date, which is generally kept on record, easily accessible online. We actually looked it up. Turns out the last frost date in Athens County this year is May 15th, which is very shocking to me, and actually is shocking to others. One, Dr. Trace, also shared his surprise with me, because if you look around other counties close nearby, the rest of Ohio, May 3rd, May 5th, these are the last frost dates, but we're I guess in these hills, it just gets too cold at night, and that's why the frost date's so late. But, I mean, we did get a head start, and, some things have made it this far. I'm not too worried. I think that everything should go smoothly.
Hello, and welcome to day 30. We've had some limited growth here, seeing as how we planted a little earlier than we should have. But miraculously, we've got some lettuce sprouts coming up. We've got one patch right here, another here. Kohlrabi's nice and green. Got some onion shoots reaching up toward the sky. Got the poussettes right here. Our mint row, voracious as always.
So, even though we've experienced quite a few difficulties in starting this garden earlier in the season, we can still see some green and we can still see life happening, and our efforts are not for waste. And, give it another 30-40 days and we should have some harvestable vegetables to put onto our plate. But more importantly, throughout this process, we made ourselves feel good, and we've started to help make the environment a better place. That's all we can do. So, look forward to a second video coming about the final steps of this later in the summer. And have a good day. Go green. So, how do you feel that planting a local garden in your backyard or your local community garden is beneficial to the local environment?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that a garden provides that you just don't find, especially around here where we're dominated by forests. You can have situations where you're producing flowers, you're producing a food source for different types of insects, either good or bad, but still it's improving biodiversity. You got to imagine that just you get the flowers, especially honeybees, things like that, pollinators, which can help build up that population, go to other gardens or other type of native plants. I think this is one of the problems that we've been finding, at least in the Midwest, is that when you talk about gardening, you're talking about like organic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Because if you're just spraying that stuff, then no, that gets rid of
Everything's
everything.
lost.
Yeah, it's gone. That it can provide kind of this basis, and I think, just one person planting a garden is okay, but if a lot of people do it, it will have this kind of benefit of when you start thinking about higher trophic levels, like the insects, and think about the birds that eat the insects and things like that. It can basically cascade up, or even the rotten vegetables and things like that, and the flies. It's always food for something else, and so there's good in that. Obviously, it could help out the local deer and rabbits and things like that, which might not need any help, anything like that. But you can get a lot of that kind of stuff um, through that too. And if you do it right, good gardening can improve soil quality. It can help sequester carbon. I mean, it's at the very, very small scale, but any little bit helps. And then all of a sudden you think about, well, if you're producing your own food, then there's less people shipping it in, and then you start thinking larger scale things. How much fuel is being spent, just to ship this stuff in, and where you're getting it locally. So it kind of has this cascading effect, but obviously the more people do it, the greater the effect it